Here's a promo drop for social media radio featuring the Secret Smoke Society. Check it out.
When the pandemic hit, man, how did you guys just initially react, man? What was your mindset during that whole time, man?
So it wasn't really a clear mindset because no one was prepared for it. I don't care who you are, what you're doing. No one was prepared for this pandemic to take over the way it took over.
Yeah.
So instead of having a mindset on what you're going to do, you kind of were forced to pivot. Either pivot and adjust or shut down. Mm-hmm. And obviously we pivoted as much as we could, and to a degree where we never closed even one day during the pandemic.
What do you think was the initial biggest challenge during the pandemic?
It was just wondering what tomorrow holds. You didn't know if you were going to get shut down tomorrow, whether these restrictions and regulations were going to get even more aggressive the next day, the next week, the next month. So it was very difficult to kind of foresee or foreshadow what's going to happen. And in doing so, you weren't really sure how to order, if you should order, how much you should order. So that, it just threw everything in the air. Most of the times we were shooting in the dark, hoping for the best.
I know we spoke the other night. You said that retail stayed pretty strong, though.
Right. So retail did stay pretty strong because, well, we had no choice that the lounge portion was closed and forced to close by the state and federal government for the most part. But we were able to pivot and stay open the retail side. And in doing so, I believe we were one of the few cigar shops, if not at one point the only cigar shop in the whole state to still be open during the pandemic. So that allowed us to not only take care of our regular clientele and fulfill their needs for premium cigars, but also gain a whole new clientele that weren't even privy to us, that were now forced to come to us from parts as far north as Baltimore, parts as far south as Richmond. They were coming up here because they heard and they called and saw that we were open.
What drove you to be in this industry and purchasing? Just talk to me about that.
My dad, I'll give credit, 100% credit to my dad. He started in retail a long time ago, and he took me with him from as young as 11 years old. Mm-hmm. I used to go help him out on weekends at his gas stations, at 7-Eleven, whatever he had at that time. I would help him every weekend, and we would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, get to the store by 6, work pretty much more than half the day. He'd drop me back home, and then he would go to his second job, which is at the casinos. And he did that for 3 years.
And where was this at?
This is in New Jersey.
Okay.
So he got me really early used to retail and business. All the meanwhile, he still had his 9 to 5, so to speak, just to make sure that the bills are being paid.
Right.
Because again, business is never a sure thing. Mm-hmm. But he got me involved when I was 11, and then at one point he transitioned over to solely tobacco stores in Delaware. Okay. Now, full-scale tobacco stores. That means cigarettes, pipe tobacco, cigarette tobacco, premium cigars, the whole nine.
Right.
And he had a full-scale tobacco stores, and I worked them pretty heavily throughout high school and early college. And once I graduated, I stepped back into the family business, both feet in this time, and with the knowledge I have now from a degree, and I was able to see his books more so understand his books. So when I was looking into his books, I said, the cigarette game is so risky for the most part, and it's also so unattractive in terms of ROI. To make $1,000 in the cigarette game, you have to invest over $10,000. So the ROI is just complete crap.
Yeah.
But other parts of the segment had better ROIs for less investment, which looked more attractive, and premium cigars was one of them. And I had my first premium cigar when I graduated college, and it was in fact an Ashton Cabinet number 6. And I just remember reading about it, looking at the box, seeing what the process it was going into it, all the work, the dedication, the fermentation, the aging, it drew me in right away. So when I first started smoking it, I understood, for the most part, as much as a new guy can understand, what I'm smoking, the quality of what I'm smoking, how this isn't cigarette tobacco, how this is completely different.
Right.
So from the first cigar, I was hooked. I pivoted over there in Delaware. From my dad's tobacco stores, I opened up my own cigar lounge. It's called Cigar Lounge in Wilmington. It's in Wilmington, Delaware. It's still there today. For the most part, it's managed by a very good manager of mine. His name is Corey.
Okay.
And he's my right hand over there, so I don't have to be there.
How does it compare to this spot, TinderBox, in terms of...
It's almost like a David and Goliath type thing. So the one in Wilmington, Delaware is much more intimate, a little bit smaller. Not as busy as this, but we've had dedicated customers from 2008 when we opened that still come there today religiously.
What's the clientele like in either or?
So the clientele, surprisingly, in Wilmington versus Waldorf is relatively the same. You have, again, a different market now in premium cigars versus 20 years ago, but right now the market is minority driven, and not just that, but minorities with disposable income. And that's relatively the same for both locations. And which is, I mean, it's very identical in many ways. You have not so young, but decently young minorities that have money that are now appreciating the cigar game and getting more and more engulfed into the culture and the lifestyle, and they're taking it and growing with it. And it's the same for both locations.
What drew you to wanting to purchase the TinderBox?
So it was one day in February of 2013. I was going down to King George. We had a store down there that I was checking up on, and it started snowing so bad to the point where I had to cancel all my meetings, reschedule everything, but I still had to make it down there with my wife. So as we drove, it was damn near 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it might have been about 2 feet of snow on the ground. She says, well, what do you want to do? You know, everything's canceled, everything's closed. Did you want to eat something? Did you want to go somewhere? And I remembered passing this spot thinking, who would open a cigar lounge in Waldorf, Maryland, of all places? Not knowing it was the beast that it was.
Yeah.
And I told her, I was like, you know, there was a cigar bar in Waldorf that we have to drive by to get to King George. Let me see if they're open. So I called, and of course they were open. Of course I came in, and mind you, it's 2 feet of snow on the ground, state of emergency, everything's damn near closed, and there's 40 people in here smoking and drinking. So that piqued my interest heavily.
Right.
Started asking around. It's a very small industry, and somehow got a hold of the owner, and he was never intending to sell, but everyone has a price.
How would you say the industry has transformed over the past 20 years?
When you go back 20, 25 years, it wasn't guys like you and me that were enjoying these.
Right.
We all know who was enjoying it.
Exactly.
And it was such an exclusive club where you and I weren't even allowed membership.
Right.
So to speak. But with the economy growing in many ways, especially for minority driven, which has been great for us, we were now allowed access to something that wasn't allowed to us. And now we're now privy to luxurious goods like this, but we are engaging of it. We're enjoying it. We're enjoying the full spectrum of what it is. But again, 20, 25 years ago, you and I would not be the typical guy sitting in a cigar lounge. Nor would we be welcome, typically.
What do you think is the benefit when you see yourself working with a cigar concierge? What do you see as a benefit for not only them, but for you as well with working with them?
Well, because it's all about reciprocity.
Okay.
And you know, even though I might help them out today and they might help me out tomorrow, it doesn't necessarily mean we're both going to get it back right away. We don't know where it's going to take us.
Right.
The culture is all about brotherhood. Let me help my brother, because in one day I might need help and he might be there for me.
Right.
But you got to do it in such a way where you don't expect it to happen. But if it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, you were still able to help your brother with however you could help.
Right.
Now, obviously, Antoine and us and Papa Midnight, we've been helping each other for 5 years.
Right.
They've helped us, we've helped them. It's been a great relationship. We've been able to help them grow, and vice versa. They bring down a diverse crowd to here from up north that weren't privy to us.
Right.
They brought down a set of clientele that didn't know about TinderBox, didn't know about me, didn't know about what we're all about down here.
Yeah.
So because of people that trust them and what they believe in and what they believe to be a good lounge or a good setting for their clientele, they were trusted enough to bring all those people down here, which we obviously fully engaged.
So what are some plans that you have with the place over the next 6 months as we start to come out of COVID?
So one thing that we've been really good at here at TinderBox, as you've seen and many customers have seen, is our extensive selection in bourbon and scotches and tequilas and some rums. But we never really touched on wines, mainly because we were so engulfed in the present that we kind of just put it on the back burner. But as cigars and wines are, the flavors, the nuances, the fermentation, the aging, they go hand in hand. So we're missing a big part of that segmented market. So we are going to put in a wine and champagne bar inside the TinderBox that's going to be solely fixated on our selection of wines and champagnes, because we've given so much attention to bourbon and scotches now that I believe we have over 200 varieties.
Another thing that I've seen, you got the tent outside. What's going to be the next step in terms of events as you come out of COVID with using the tent? And I know eventually you want to get some live music back up in here.
So our goal is, once the state of emergency is lifted by Governor Hogan, the tent will then have to be taken down in 30 days. In the meanwhile, we're already in a plan review with the county of Charles County to get a permanently built deck outside, the same size of the tent.
Okay.
So we'll have a permanent fixture there, not only just for the spring and summer when the weather's nice, but also heated and enclosed for when the wintertime happens.
Nice.
So that's our goal for the outside tent area, where we'll also hold live music, live entertainment. So you still kind of have best of both worlds. If you want nice peace and quiet and nice conversation, you can come inside. But if you want to go outside and enjoy some nice music while you smoke and drink, well, then you have the option to go outside.
What are some things that maybe you may have picked up from other cigar lounges that you've incorporated, and some other cigar lounges that maybe I would like to incorporate that?
One thing that I've seen at so many lounges that are able to have a liquor license is the pairings they've done. With, if the lounge suggests that you smoke this cigar and drink it with that scotch or that bourbon, and they pair it and they give a special price and people partake in it. We've tried that here a few times, but our clientele here is so adamant on knowing what they want. They're not very adapted to taking a pairing well, which is fine. Which is fine. But we're just trying to introduce them to something they may not be used to, like the seaweed and iodine taste from a Islay versus the spice from a Highland that they're used to already, like a Macallan. So we're just trying to open up their palate a little bit more to different things, rather than keeping them in that same tunnel that they're used to.
Now, another thing that I see that you're constantly fighting, you seem to be on the tip of, is what's going on with the FDA and cigars. What happened with them basically putting a pause on what they're going to do with that regulation, and what are you expecting as you come out of that?
It's no mystery here as to which political sides are better for tobacco. Regardless of what your political views are, historically, Republicans are better for tobacco in terms of taxes and regulations. And when Trump came in, the cigar industry, for the most part, was excited and breathed a sign of relief, thinking that now we have a Republican president in place that's going to get the FDA off our backs and unwind this whole mess that we've gotten ourselves into with the FDA during the Obama administration. That wasn't the case. The only thing Trump did was just put the FDA on pause.
Now, what did they put on pause exactly?
So the substantial equivalence, which means if you made a cigar before 2007, you were allowed to have it on the market, provided if you introduced all the paperwork behind the blending, the working, the fermentation, all that stuff, provided it was made prior to 2007. If your cigar was made after 2007, you weren't allowed to sell it in the market.
Period. You just couldn't sell it.
You'd be off the market. You couldn't sell it.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Damn, that cuts into a lot of things. Are you saying that anything before 2007 you can't sell for a cigar?
Correct.
They don't give you a time period afterwards where you can sell?
No.
So that means basically in 2027, basically people smoke a 20-year-old cigar.
Correct.
Oh man, that's not good at all. So what are some things that guys like you are doing to fight that?
So we got the pause from Trump, which is the only thing he did. He could have done so much more, but he didn't. So that's why the industry now is like, well, we had this Republican president and he didn't really do much, and now we have a Democratic president back in play, which he's already put the wheels back in motion. Not only that, but he started back in motion with another wagon hitched to the trailer, where now the federal government wants to tax premium cigars at the same rate disparity of cigarettes. So what that means is cigarettes is taxed at almost $11 per carton. So they want to treat a cigar like a cigar carton. So the tax increase would be in the hundreds of percents.
Are there any lobby groups that you're part of that's actually helping to fight that? And what is something that other cigar people can kind of put their voice to it to kind of help give us some more leverage?
So the two big advocacy groups in our industry that are fighting this tooth and nail from its inception has been the CRA and the PCA.
Okay.
And they lobby heavily in DC and on Capitol Hill to fight for our right to not only smoke our cigars, but continue to smoke our cigars at a reasonable rate.
Talking about cigarettes, totally different from cigars.
Absolutely.
And now you're in a situation where you're being lumped in with cigarettes, yet you can't sell cigars after 2007.
Correct.
So it's like they're trying to kill the industry.
They really, honestly, the Congress people don't really understand what they're doing. They're being actually lobbied by a bigger, darker power that's called Big Tobacco.
Okay.
They're being lobbied by the likes of R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris, who respectively make Marlboro, Newport, and Winston Camel Salem cigarettes.
Okay, hold on. Let me get this straight now. So basically, you're saying that the cigarette people are kind of behind the lobbies who are basically trying to crush you guys.
Correct. And they're behind it for just the most asinine reason. The way Philip Morris and the way R.J. Reynolds look at the big picture of things is, you're a smoker. Actually, let me rewind back. 18% of Americans smoke. Out of that 18% of Americans that smoke, less than 1% smoke premium cigars. It just gives you a view as to how small we are as a group.
That's basically like 5% of it, yeah.
It's nothing. So the way Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds look at the thing is, if you're a cigarette smoker, you might switch to cigars at some point. So what we're going to do is we're going to crush any competition that may be competition that's really not competition to us right now, so that they only have but so many things to choose for the tobacco fix.
Well, it sounds like they're trying to say that you guys are the same. The cigarette companies are trying to say that you guys are the same.
They look at any and all combustible tobacco as competition, regardless of what they're smoking, whether it's Marlboro Lights, whether it's Padron 1926. They think we're the same people, and that at one point we can smoke either or, so let's just cut out the latter so that way they only have to pick us.
Do you feel that you can actually maybe work with more people like Cigars Concierge to kind of get that point across?
Absolutely. Antoine and Papa are very good at explaining things like this to their clientele base that aren't in the know, that don't know really what's going on behind the scenes. So they've been instrumental in educating their folks as to what's going on in Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
And right now, education is the biggest thing about this issue, because the more people that know, the more people that can help put their voice in. Because again, like I said before, we're 1% out of 18% of people that smoke in the U.S. So we are the smallest group, so that means we have the smallest voice. So the more noise we make, the better it's going to be for any legislation or lobbying against our industry.
The cigar industry, in terms of revenue that it creates in the U.S., what is that number there?
So cigarettes contribute to almost a little over $25 billion a year in taxes. That's cigarettes.
Yeah.
Cigars contribute less than $1 billion. It's probably less than $500 million, to be honest.
Okay.
That's how much little tax is involved with cigars in terms of the amount of people that smoke it, and already at the rate that we're taxed at.
Right.
So by increasing our tax exponentially to hundreds and hundreds of percent, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get to that $1 billion mark.
Right.
That just means you're going to make people stop smoking cigars, because half the people can't afford it anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
And even though the typical clientele of a premium cigar does have disposable income, they have disposable incomes to a mean.
Do you talk to a lot of the different cigar owners in this area, and what are some things that y'all may be chatting about in terms of this and also clientele?
So the cigar owners the cigar lounge owners that I do speak to, we have a great relationship. It's very open. We bounce ideas off each other. We let each other know what's going on in the industry. We let each other know what's going on with the clientele. So we kind of bounce ideas off each other in that regard and see, what works for you may not work for me, and vice versa. But we don't know unless we try it.
Right.
So it's a great community of lounge owners that are respective of each other, and more so respective of how they do business. So it's a great way for us to network and just talk about how our clientele is a little bit different, but vastly the same.
So basically, it really kind of is a little way of research with each other.
Correct.
Yeah, some of the think tank. Now, you brought up something that just blew my mind, and you guys were chatting about the other night, and we're talking about different lounges, talking about the lifestyle and the culture, and you and Antoine started talking about Atlanta.
Yeah.
150 cigar lounges. How do you feel about that? I mean, first of all, just give me your insight on that, man.
So there's two takes on it.
Okay.
Now, if you ever took an economics class in college, the theory is that a group or a cluster of the same type of industry in one area brings a bigger population of that industry to the area.
Right.
Now, that's economic theory.
Yeah.
And we all know economic theory is what it is until it's proven real. So until then, it's just a theory.
Right.
So in theory, it sounds great to have, as a consumer, it sounds great to have 150 different options in the city of Atlanta alone to find the lounge you like.
Right.
But on the flip side, as a lounge owner, that is cutthroat.
Yeah.
It is cutthroat.
You got to stay on top. You
Right.
got to constantly make sure you're hot.
The industry isn't growing at a fast enough pace to keep up with the amount of lounges opening. So what that in turn means is we're all fighting over the same clientele. And what that means is if certain lounges don't get the clientele they need to just stay afloat, they start getting desperate.
Right.
And they start doing things in the industry that they shouldn't be doing.
Right.
And that's what kind of starts this whole capitalistic competition thing to the point where now it makes no sense being in business as a cigar lounge owner because I'm damn near selling cigars at cost. Again, great for the consumer, horrible for a lounge owner.
So what do you see in terms of where we are right now, coming out of COVID, and you're looking at lounge owners? Where do you see the industry going with all these particular dilemmas, issues that you got to tackle? Where do you see it going over the next 5 to 10 years?
So I see the, for lack of a better term, the old guard changing. Your lounges that have been in operation since the early 90s or even longer, you're gonna see these guys start to sell off. You're gonna see more younger blood, more importantly, more minority blood coming into the industry in terms of ownership, which is what we need, because we need a representation of the clientele that's coming into our lounges. Nothing against the old guard, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, there's not much that we can link with in terms of who used to own this lounge before 20 years ago versus who may own it now. And I just see the industry turning not only younger, not more minority, but I also see it growing. Because during COVID, the industry went through a cigar boom.
Yeah.
Wasn't the biggest one in the 90s, but it was big enough.
You think that's because people stuck at home and really, because I think with retail, you guys were just selling. I mean,
Yeah.
you guys still sell. I think you told me a story about the line being just so long that people just sell.
Right, so at one point the state regulation was that we were not allowed to have more than 10 people inside our location for retail, including employees. So we had about 3, maybe 4 employees working at that time, which means we could allow 6 customers inside at a time. And when customers come up to buy a cigar, 9 out of 10 times, it's not a, $10, here's your 10, good day, have a great day, see you later, bye. It's not like that. It's, oh, can you tell me about the cigar? Sure. XYZ, ABC, whatever have you, and then they rebuttal with, oh, well, I like this, or well, I like this. So it's a whole conversation back and forth.
Right.
Because the transaction isn't just about the transaction, it's about the education of what the consumer's buying. If they're not gonna trust you to sell them a cigar that they may like, well, they're not gonna come back here. They have no loyalty here because to them, you're just another online guy. But if I can educate you as to why you should smoke this, because you smoke this, and because you like that, well, then I got you. And I got you in terms of you trust me because I'm not gonna do you wrong.
Exactly. Do you see something that you might want to incorporate in your events a little bit more in terms of educating people, like having the events and really just talking about and debunking the myths and the cliches?
Right, so the biggest thing we fight with clientele coming in is some of them have preconceived notions, and this is more so true with newer clientele. We have your typical guys that come and say, I only smoke Cubans. We have, give me the best cigar you got or the most expensive cigar you got.
Yeah.
And it's really hard at first to break down to these clientele that's saying, hey, Cubans aren't what you really think they are. You're missing a whole big segment of the market that you need to be privy to.
Right.
So if someone's smoking only Cubans, we have to introduce them to why a Nicaraguan cigar in this particular caliber might be better than that Cuban you might be smoking. And we explain to them the fermentation, the aging process, more so the quality control coming out of the big 3, which is Dominican Republic, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Right. That the quality control between these 3 regions is vastly better than what's coming out of Cuba.
Gotcha.
So that's just one portion. And then customers that come in just think that price dictates production or quality necessarily isn't always true.
You were talking something also about, the Cubans and how they're just basically being, you were talking about how they're being manufactured or they're already they're already taken by
So-
UK and other spots around the world. Yeah.
So what happened before is Habanos SA, which is the main distributor of all Cuban cigars across the globe, is half owned by the Cuban government, which, as we know, is communistic. Now, a portion of the other half of Habanos SA was now recently sold to a Chinese group. And the Chinese group paid billions for this licensing agreement, not because they also got the rights for the US market and non-Cuban market. They just wanted the Cuban market for Habanos SA. So at the end of the day, you have two Cuban governments that own roughly 75% of all Cubans coming out of Cuba. So at the end of the day, are they really concerned about quality control and what you're smoking to be the best Cuban ever? Or are they more so concerned about getting production out to make money?
What are some of your favorite cigars, my man?
So, I mean, you gotta...
Well, we know the Padron. That's one of mine as well, man.
But I've been really in love with the Plasencia Almafuerte line, specifically the Salomon. I mean, I've never tasted a cigar.
You got that here, man?
I do. I have
make sure I
all
get that before I
sizes.
leave, man.
Absolutely. But in terms of having 100% clean organic tobacco, I've never tasted anything as clean, as crisp, and as tasty as the tobacco coming out of the Plasencia farms. And I think if you were to side by side compare that cigar with anything we have in the humidor, it's going to win 9 out of 10 times.
Me, I'm into a full body smoke. Are you more into a medium body, light, full body, and if so, why?
Well, I smoke between 3 and 5 cigars a day. So if I start at full body, I got to stay at full body, or else I'm not going to taste anything below that.
Right.
So I typically try to aim between that medium plus line. Not exactly full, not exactly medium, just in between, just enough flavor to where if I decide to change gears a little bit, my palate's not shot.
What do you see as some of the favorite cigars of those true women aficionados out there?
So just like any of us male smokers, we all started with something sweet. I mean, it's the name of the game. It's easy to smoke, it's easy to like, it's easy to appreciate. But as we grow more into the industry and more into the culture and the brotherhood, we understand that, the sweet stuff was cool, but not really take appreciative to the aged tobacco, the Maduro tobacco, something more affluent, not so sweet. And that's what women are doing. Women, again, they're starting off sweet and light because, again, that's what we're all accustomed to when we first come in. But now you see a nice transition of them saying, well, I don't want something sweet. I want something that pairs with my red wine. I want something that pairs with my scotch. I want something that pairs with my rum. And then we segue them into something mild that's not sweet. And then as they get more accustomed, they start liking something medium. And then some days they come in and says, I've had a rough day. I need to really relax. Give me the strongest bourbon you got with the nice, strongest tobacco you got. And sometimes these ladies are pairing things that are stronger than some of the guys smoking.
What is one particular thing that you would just like for people to understand that it's not true, why it's not true, and debunking that can really make you enjoy this culture?
So our newer customers have a problem of inhaling, not understanding why they shouldn't inhale. Mind you, this is very premium tobacco, so it is heavier than something that comes in a cigarette. Because for one, cigarettes have a filter. So you're not really getting the tobacco taste from a cigarette because it's being filtered. There's no filter on cigars. If you were to take that smoke in, trust me, it would not feel good in your stomach. And it wasn't meant to be taken in. But one of the biggest things we have with clientele, and this goes for newbies as well as aficionados, is that quantity over quality. And what I mean by say this is, guys come in and they like their 60 rings, 70 rings, even 80 rings, but they won't look twice at that Lancero because it's a thinner stick, it's a thinner gauge. They don't feel like they're getting their bang for their buck. But again, going back to quality versus quantity, 50% of a cigar's flavor is, as you know, in the wrapper. So when you have the wrapper to filler ratio upside down, meaning when you're smoking a 60 or 70 ring gauge cigar, you're having more filler versus wrapper. So that ratio is upside down. So you're losing a lot of flavor in the wrapper because you got this overload of filler in this big gauge cigar.
Right.
Now, Lanceros are the optimal cigar to smoke because the wrapper to filler ratio is even, dead down. So you're getting the true taste of what that blender wanted you to taste in a Lancero or in a smaller ring gauge size versus something in a 60 or 70. So again, quality versus quantity. I understand Lanceros may not last as long as a 60 or 70 ring gauge,
But the flavor.
And then you have to ask yourself, well, are you in it for, again, quality versus quantity? Do you want to taste a good cigar, or you just want to sit here for 3 hours and smoke a big cigar?
What are some new cigars coming out that are about to hit that you're looking forward to, and why?
So the first time in the industry this has ever happened, and I think it's very cool, it's very respective, and I think it's very very different than what they've done. So in the last few years, we've lost two legends in the cigar industry. One being Orlando Padron, who was the hierarchy of the Padron family, and we lost Carlito Fuente Sr., who was head honcho of Fuente. So Padron and Fuente got together, and they said at this year's trade show, we're going to release a cigar in homage to each other's hierarchy. So what that means is Padron will release a cigar in homage to Carlito Fuente Sr., and Fuente will release a cigar in homage to Orlando Padron.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that one.
So are we.
So, is there anything additional you'd like to add before we get ready to head out, my man?
I mean, we always appreciate our clientele, and we appreciate the fact that we know you guys have choices to go elsewhere.
Right.
There's a lot of lounges in Maryland. There's a lot of places to go in Maryland. There's a lot of places to buy online. But when you come here and you buy one cigar from us, at the very least, we appreciate that. Because not only does it obviously keep the lights on in here, but it pays our employees, it pays our overhead, and it keeps us open to better enjoy the culture and the brotherhood that this industry is just always growing in. Without lounges, where would you guys smoke? My name is Raj Singh. I'm from TinderBox Waldorf, and you're getting linked in on COUCHAT.